Hey guys, I'm Ashley, and today we're gonna make this massive 4x8ft Lite Brite. I know this is super ridiculous and unnecessary, but it was a lot of fun, so let's check it out. Okay, so it's Monday, and today I have to cut 500 plus of these little acrylic pegs for the Lite Brite. I have only until Thursday morning to finish this project, so I'm definitely in a time crunch, and I have about 4 days, so we'll see what happens and see if I can do it. Now, since I had to cut 500 of these pegs, I knew that was going to take forever, so I had to call in some reinforcements to help me out. We cut the acrylic rods on the miter saw, and my friend's kid came over and helped me, and he cut a total of 140 pegs for me. Since I was going to have to make this repeated cut a bunch, I took a piece of gaffer's tape and I measured out the distance of each peg and I stuck it down because I knew it was going to stick to the miter saw really well and it wasn't going to move as I pushed the acrylic rod up against it, and this made it go a lot quicker. The next part of the project was to go get some plywood and 2x4s to make the frame and the grid itself. Now, I cannot easily cut big pieces of plywood myself, so when I went to Lowe's, I just had the employee help me out, and he got the plywood down for me because I'm super short, and he cut it for me on the panel saw. Okay, so what I've done is I've used this ruler to mark out my parameters of the Lite Brite pattern for the holes that I need to drill. So I just did that with this ruler, super boring, but then I didn't really want to go in and measure each line and each row because each hole, I believe, is an inch apart and each row is an inch and a half apart. So what I did is I just took the template that I made on the computer and I printed it out, and hopefully this will just kind of help me skip some of the more boring stuff and just make it easier to get it correct. But we'll see. It's either going to really help me or it's either going to screw me up a lot. So this is day 2. I have 2 more days. No, I have 1 more day. I have 1 or 2 more days to finish this. And as you can see, it is pouring rain, so I can't paint anything. So we'll see how this goes. Hopefully it all gets finished in time and it looks as cool as I think it's gonna look in my head. Making this grid for this giant Lite Brite was one of the most tedious things I have ever done. It took forever and it was hard to get it really accurate, and if I had a big enough CNC machine, I would have totally done it on there because it would have saved so much time. Like all of my projects, I always plan them out in Illustrator first, and so I took the template from there to make for this template to transfer the center of the holes that I needed to drill out onto the plywood. I used a center punch to make this easy. The other most tedious thing about this project was drilling 500 holes for these acrylic pegs to go into. Now, it definitely makes your hand hurt, so if you ever do something like this, be prepared for it. I did get a pretty nasty blister after just drilling a few holes, and so I had to put a glove on, and it sort of helped, but not really. But it just took so many hours to do this. It took me a full day plus about 5 other hours at night to do this. Also, after you've drilled about 4 or 5 holes, this gets really old and boring, and you might lose your will to live, but I really had to just push through because I was on such a time crunch, and I finally got it all done, but it was a big effort, and it honestly really sucked. In the future, I probably would never do something like this again, but it was cool to see that I was able to do this without a CNC machine. I decided to use 2x4s for the frame of this because I knew it was going to be sturdy. I cut them down to a couple different sizes that would fit the frame and not be overly bulky, and I also cut out a bunch of supports. Once they were cut at the table saw, I then ran them through the planer just to get rid of the curved edges. I attached the frame pieces with wood glue, and then I clamped it down, and from the front of the Lite Brite I shot in some brad nails just to kind of act as extra insurance to the screws I would add later. To hold the acrylic pegs in place, I had to get a 4x8ft piece of clear acrylic. It's only about an 1/8 inch thick, but so I made these supports to go on the bottom and the top and the sides, since there was going to be no other support in the middle where all the holes are, because otherwise you would see it and it would block the pegs themselves. So I did this, one, just to support the acrylic like I said, and also so that I can have something to drill the acrylic into. Now, a piece of the acrylic did break off, and so I just used some hot glue to kind of fix it. I'm using these supports to anchor the acrylic to, and it's very important when you're drilling into a acrylic that you countersink it first and then you screw in the screw, and you cannot do it too tight, otherwise the acrylic will crack and break. One of the final steps to this project was getting lighting done for the back piece of plywood that was going to light up all of these acrylic pegs. Now I decided to use LED strips, and Elsa really decided that she had not helped out with this project enough, so she offered a paw. Now I did run into a problem with these LED strips. I did not have enough power going to them. The 12-volt power supply I had just wasn't enough, so it was only lighting half of them. So since I was on such a time crunch, I did have to cheat a little bit, and I went to Harbor Freight and got a few bright LED lights just to compensate for the strips that weren't lighting up. Okay, so to paint all the pegs, I used a mix of this Krylon Sea Glass paint and just Rust-Oleum normal paint. The Sea Glass worked really well. Unfortunately, they don't have a lot of colors, so I did have to use Rust-Oleum, and what I did is I just sprayed it like super far away from the pegs themselves, and it worked out pretty well. It gave basically the same effect. I just had to be really careful that I wasn't too close to the pegs. I painted as many pegs as I could at home before I had to move everything out to the camp to where this thing was gonna live, and honestly I didn't get to paint that many just because I was so behind, and a lot of these lighter colors needed multiple coats. At this point, this is now about 2 in the morning on the Wednesday before this thing had to be debuted. I also still had to cut the rest of the acrylic pegs as well. Painting the rest of these pegs took forever, and I definitely got a little mini finger cramp, but ultimately these pegs ended up looking really awesome, and I love these bright colors, and they just looked really cool. It was very 90s feel, definitely 80s, and I just love the Lite Brite toy in general, so I think it came out really awesome, and I was happy with it. More importantly, my sister and her boss were very happy with it. I made this massive thing for a big youth conference that they were putting on, and the kids really enjoyed it, and it was just a lot of fun and just looked pretty cool. Alright guys, thanks for watching this video. If you liked it, hit the like button, or you can leave a comment if there's something I should have done different, or if you didn't like it. And please consider subscribing to my YouTube channel. I try to put out a new project every couple weeks. Thanks for watching.